Tonight, we're taking it easy with a slow, simple journey through the little details most people overlook. Just settle in, get comfy, and let your brain switch off while the facts quietly roll by. There's something quietly comforting about a Pokemon that feels like it belongs to the nighttime, the kind of creature you could imagine watching from a high tree branch while the world goes still and calm. Noctowl fits that role perfectly. It's a Pokemon that carries the feeling of late hours and open skies with a design that looks both wise and slightly mysterious, like it's always paying attention even when everything else has gone to sleep. Noctowl is a normal and flying type Pokemon introduced in Generation 2. It evolves from Hoothoot starting at level 20, which makes it a relatively early evolution in Johto. Hoothoot itself is small and round, with a simple owl shape and a clock-like theme in its behavior, and Noctowl is the more mature form, growing taller and gaining a more serious look. Even though it's an early game evolution, Noctowl has a distinct presence because of its unique color pattern and the way it's described in the Pokédex. One of the most noticeable things about Noctowl's design is the shape of its head. It has a pointed crest, wide eyes, and a face pattern that makes it look like it's wearing a mask. The coloring is usually brown and tan, with a lighter face and darker markings. Its eyes are large and expressive, which is a common trait in owl designs, but in Noctowl's case, they feel extra important because so much of its identity is tied to vision and perception. Noctowl's Pokédex entries often focus on how well it can see in the dark. Many descriptions mention that it can spot prey easily even in low light, and that its eyesight is so strong it can see tiny movements from far away. This fits real-world owl behavior, since owls are known for hunting at night using their sharp senses. Pokemon takes that natural trait and exaggerates it slightly, making Noctowl feel like a creature built specifically for nighttime travel and observation. Another recurring detail is that Noctowl is described as being able to rotate its head extremely far, sometimes even implying a near full rotation. This is another trait borrowed from real owls, which can turn their heads much farther than humans. It gives Noctowl an eerie but interesting quality. It's not doing anything magical, but it's doing something that looks strange if you aren't used to it. Noctowl's typing is normal and flying, which is a very common combination, especially for early route bird Pokemon. But Noctowl still feels a little different because it isn't just a generic bird. It's specifically an owl, and that changes its vibe. Many early birds are small and fast, like Pidgey or Spearow, but Noctowl feels calmer and more deliberate. It's less about darting through the sky and more about quietly gliding through the night. In the Johto games, Hoothoot is often one of the first Pokemon you can encounter at night. This is one of the earliest examples of Pokemon using the real-world time system to affect gameplay. In Pokemon Gold and Silver, certain Pokemon only appear during specific times of day. Hoothoot appearing at night makes it feel like part of the world's natural rhythm. If you play at night, you meet the night Pokemon. That detail helped Johto feel more alive compared to Kanto. Because Hoothoot evolves at level 20, Noctowl becomes available fairly early if you choose to train it. This means it can be part of your team for a long portion of the game. Early availability is often what makes a Pokemon memorable, because the longer it travels with you, the more attached you can become to it. Noctowl isn't the strongest Pokemon in the world, but it can feel like a steady companion if you choose to keep it. Noctowl's stat distribution has generally been balanced towards special defense and special attack rather than physical power. This makes sense for an owl Pokemon, because it feels more like a creature that uses precision and awareness rather than brute strength. It can learn moves like Confusion and Psychic in some games, which gives it a slightly mystical edge even though it isn't a psychic type. That move access is part of what makes Noctowl feel wise, because psychic type moves are often associated with intelligence and focus. This also connects to one of Noctowl's more interesting traits. It has often been able to learn moves that other early birds don't get. While many flying types focus on physical moves like peck and wing attack, Noctowl sometimes gets access to moves like Hypnosis, Dream Eater, or extrasensory attacks, depending on the generation. This makes it feel like a more specialized bird Pokemon, one that isn't just flying and pecking, but using strange nighttime techniques. Hypnosis is especially fitting because it matches the idea of an owl that can stare into your eyes and make you sleepy. That's not how real owls work, but it's a perfect fantasy exaggeration. The idea of Noctowl using hypnosis makes it feel like a creature from folklore, like a nighttime guardian that can calm or control opponents. Noctowl can also learn moves like Reflect in some games, which reduces physical damage for your team. Reflect is another move that fits the idea of protection and calm. It's not an aggressive move, it's a defensive support move that makes Noctowl useful in battles where you want to play slowly and safely rather than aggressively. In terms of abilities, Noctowl has commonly had Insomnia and Keen Eye. Insomnia prevents it from falling asleep, which is fitting for a Pokemon that is active at night and always alert. Keen Eye prevents accuracy from being lowered, which matches the idea of sharp vision. Both abilities feel like they were chosen because they match the theme, not because they were meant to make Noctowl dominant in battle. Noctowl's hidden ability in some generations is Tinted Lens. Tinted Lens doubles the damage of not very effective moves. This is a very interesting ability because it makes Noctowl's attacks more reliable even when it doesn't have the best type matchup. It's like Noctowl can see through resistances and still hit hard. This ability gives Noctowl a unique niche, and it fits the theme of enhanced perception. Noctowl's move pool includes many flying type moves like Wing Attack, Air Slash, and later Hurricane in some cases. Air Slash is particularly notable because it is a special flying move, and Noctowl often uses special attacks better than physical ones. Air Slash also has a chance to flinch, which fits the idea of an owl swooping down suddenly and startling an opponent. Noctowl can also learn moves like Uproar, which is funny because it's a loud move for a Pokemon that feels quiet and calm, but it can make sense in the context of owls making strong calls at night. Noctowl isn't always silent. It can be loud when it wants to be. Noctowl's relationship with Hoot Hoot is also interesting because Hoot Hoot has a theme of timekeeping. Hoot Hoot is described as being able to sense the time and cry at the same time every day. This makes Hoot Hoot feel like a living clock. When it evolves into Noctowl, the timekeeping theme becomes less obvious, but the idea of awareness remains. Noctowl feels like the mature version of that concept, less about announcing the time and more about watching the world. In the anime, Noctowl has one of the most memorable roles because Ash catches a shiny Noctowl. This is significant because shiny Pokemon were extremely rare and mysterious when they were first introduced. Ash catching a shiny Noctowl made Noctowl stand out as a special Pokemon in the series. Even people who didn't care about Noctowl in the games might remember it because of that anime moment. That shiny Noctowl also created a long-lasting association between Noctowl and shinies in general. Noctowl's shiny form is different from its normal form, often with a more golden or altered coloration. Shiny forms are a major part of Pokemon collecting culture now, but early on they felt like secrets. Noctowl being tied to that early shiny moment made it feel more legendary than it actually is. Noctowl has also appeared in many spin-off games over the years. In Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, it often fits the role of a wise guide or a calm character because its design naturally suggests wisdom. In other games, it appears as a standard flying type, but it still carries that night owl identity. In the main series games, Noctowl is often not considered a top-tier Pokemon for competitive battling. It doesn't have the strongest stats compared to later flying types, and it can be outclassed by other birds that hit harder or have better abilities. But Noctowl's appeal is not really about being the strongest. It's about being steady and thematic. It's a Pokemon that feels like it belongs to a certain mood: quiet routes, nighttime skies, calm exploration. Noctowl's weaknesses are typical for a normal, flying type. It is weak to electric, ice, and rock, and it has a particularly dangerous weakness to rock-type moves because flying types take extra damage from rock. This makes Noctowl vulnerable to moves like Rock Slide or Stone Edge. In story playthroughs, this usually isn't a huge problem unless you're facing specific trainers, but it's something that shapes how Noctowl is used. Noctowl's resistances include grass and bug, and it is immune to ground-type moves because of its flying type. That ground immunity is always useful, because ground moves like Earthquake are extremely common and powerful. Having a flying type on your team means you have a safe switch-in against ground attacks, and Noctowl can fill that role. Noctowl also has a calm, steady animation style in many games. It doesn't bounce around aggressively like some Pokemon. It often flaps slowly or stands still with a focused look. That animation style reinforces its personality. It feels patient. It feels like it waits and watches before acting. One of the small but interesting things about Noctowl is that it's one of the few early root birds that can feel genuinely late night. Many bird Pokemon are daytime creatures. They appear in bright grass routes and sunny skies. Noctowl is different. It appears when the sun goes down. That makes it feel like part of a different world, even if it's in the same region. Over time, Noctowl has stayed consistent. It hasn't gotten a regional form. It hasn't gotten a mega evolution. It hasn't gotten a major new gimmick. It remains a simple owl Pokemon with strong senses and a quiet vibe. In a series that constantly adds new mechanics and flashy transformations, there's something nice about a Pokemon that stays exactly what it is. Noctowl's role in the Pokemon world is like a nighttime landmark. It's the creature you see when you're traveling late. It's the Pokemon that reminds you the world changes depending on the hour. It's the owl that glides through dark skies and watches everything below with calm, steady eyes. And even if it's not the strongest bird Pokemon, it remains one of the most atmospheric ones because it carries the feeling of night wherever it goes. If you've ever spent time in a cave in a Pokemon game, there's a good chance you've had a long-running relationship with the Zubat line, whether you wanted one or not. Zubat is famous for showing up constantly in random encounters, and for many players it becomes a symbol of caves, tunnels, and being interrupted every few steps. But what's funny is that the Zubat line doesn't stay annoying forever. If you actually train one and let it evolve all the way into Crobat, it becomes one of the most efficient, fast, and quietly reliable flying-type Pokemon you can have. Crobat is the final form of what starts as one of the most infamous early-game Pokemon, and it's a perfect example of a creature that rewards patience. Crobat is a poison and flying-type Pokemon introduced in Generation 2. It evolves from Golbat, but unlike most evolutions, it doesn't evolve by level. Crobat evolves through friendship, which means you need to build a bond with Golbat by keeping it in your party, using it in battles, not letting it faint too often, and generally treating it well. This is one of the most important facts about Crobat because it ties directly into what Crobat represents in the Pokemon series, the idea that a Pokemon can become stronger through trust and companionship, not just grinding levels. The Zubat line starts with Zubat, which evolves into Golbat at level 22. Golbat then evolves into Crobat when it has high friendship. In Generation 1, Golbat was the final form, and it had a reputation for being strong but awkward. Golbat looked like a huge bat with a giant mouth, and it was useful, but not especially beloved. Generation 2 changed that by adding Crobat, a sleeker, more advanced evolution that made the whole line feel complete. Crobat's design is a major shift from Golbat. Golbat has 2 wings and a wide open mouth, while Crobat has 4 wings and a more streamlined look. The extra wings make Crobat feel like it was built for speed and agility. It looks less like a cave nuisance and more like an aerial predator. Its body is smaller relative to its wings, and the wings themselves look like they can beat quickly, allowing Crobat to maneuver through tight spaces and move at high speed. That 4-wing design is also one of the reasons Crobat stands out among bat Pokemon. Most bats in Pokemon have 2 wings like normal animals, but Crobat's 4 wings make it feel more alien. It's like a bat that evolved beyond what a normal bat should be, that fits with the idea that it's the final form of the line, a more advanced creature that has adapted to its environment extremely well. Crobat's Pokédex entries often emphasize speed. Many descriptions mention that it can fly quietly, that it can move through caves without making noise, and that it can strike prey before it even realizes what's happening. Some entries describe it as being able to fly for long distances without resting, using its wings efficiently. This creates an image of Crobat as a tireless flyer, a creature that is constantly in motion. There's also a recurring theme of Crobat's flight being very quiet. This fits real-world bats, which can be silent in the air, and it makes Crobat feel more like a stealth hunter than a loud flyer. The idea of a Crobat gliding through darkness, barely making a sound, adds a subtle atmosphere to it. It's not dramatic like a dragon, it's quietly dangerous. Crobat's typing as poison and flying is shared with its pre-evolutions, but Crobat uses it better because of its stats. Poison, flying, is an interesting combination because it gives Crobat some useful resistances. It resists grass, fighting, bug, fairy in later generations, and it is immune to ground moves because of its flying type. That ground immunity is always valuable, because ground moves like Earthquake are common and powerful. Crobat can switch in safely against ground attacks, which makes it useful defensively even if it's mostly known for offense. Crobat's weaknesses are also important. It is weak to electric, ice, psychic, and rock. Rock is especially dangerous because flying types take extra damage from rock moves, and in later generations, Stealth Rock becomes a major hazard that damages flying Pokemon when they enter battle. Crobat's relationship with Stealth Rock has been a big factor in its competitive usage. Even though Crobat is fast and useful, it can be worn down quickly if hazards are on the field. Despite these weaknesses, Crobat's stats have always been one of its biggest strengths. Crobat has very high speed, making it one of the faster Pokemon in many generations. Speed is extremely important in Pokemon battles because moving first often decides who wins. Crobat's speed allows it to outspeed many threats, hit them first, and potentially flinch or weaken them before they can respond. Crobat also has decent attack, which makes it effective as a physical attacker. It can use moves like Wing Attack, Aerial Ace, and later Brave Bird. Brave Bird is especially strong, though it causes recoil damage. Crobat can also use poison-type moves like Cross Poison, which has a chance to land critical hits and poison the opponent. Cross Poison fits Crobat's theme perfectly, a fast strike with venom. One of Crobat's most famous moves in competitive play is U-Turn. U-Turn allows the user to attack and then switch out immediately, maintaining momentum. Crobat's speed makes U-Turn very effective because it can often hit first and then leave before the opponent can respond. This makes Crobat a strong pivot Pokemon, meaning it can come in, do something useful, and then switch out to a better matchup. Crobat can also learn moves like Roost, which heals it and removes its flying type temporarily for the turn. Roost gives Crobat longevity, allowing it to recover health and stay in battle longer. This is important because Crobat often takes chip damage from hazards or recoil, and having healing makes it more reliable. In terms of abilities, Crobat commonly has Inner Focus. Inner Focus prevents it from flinching, which is useful because flinching can stop a fast Pokemon from doing its job. Crobat also has Infiltrator as a hidden ability in some generations. Infiltrator allows Crobat to ignore barriers like Reflect and Light Screen, and also ignore substitutes. This is extremely useful because it means Crobat can hit opponents even if they try to hide behind a substitute. Infiltrator fits Crobat's stealth theme perfectly. It's like Crobat can slip through defenses and strike anyway. The Friendship Evolution requirement for Crobat also gives it a unique emotional identity compared to many other Pokemon. Most Pokemon evolve simply by reaching a level or using an item. Crobat evolves because it trusts you. That means if you have a Crobat, you likely spent time with it, used it in battle, and treated it well. It's a Pokemon that feels earned. This is especially satisfying because Zubat is so often seen as an annoyance. Turning an annoyance into a powerful ally feels like a small victory. Crobat's introduction in Generation 2 also helped reshape how players thought about Golbat. In Generation 1, Golbat was the final form, and it felt incomplete to some players. Crobat made Golbat feel like a middle stage, and suddenly the whole line made more sense. This is one of the best examples of how adding an evolution later can improve older Pokemon lines. Crobat's presence in Johto is also interesting because Johto has many caves and nighttime routes, making bat Pokemon feel natural. Zubat appears early, and players have plenty of opportunities to catch one. If you keep it on your team, it can evolve into Crobat relatively early compared to other final evolutions, because friendship can build quickly if you walk around and battle often. This means Crobat can become a strong team member before the mid-game, which is unusual for a final evolution. Crobat's role in the anime is less iconic than some Pokemon, but it still appears, often as a strong Pokemon used by trainers. It is usually portrayed as fast and capable, matching its game identity. It isn't usually the star of an episode, but it fits naturally into the world as a cave-dwelling predator. In Pokemon Go, Crobat is obtained by evolving Golbat with candy, and friendship is not part of the evolution process there. This changes the emotional meaning slightly, but Crobat still functions as a fast poison, flying Pokemon. It isn't one of the strongest attackers, but it is common enough that many players have one. Crobat has also appeared in many spin-off games. In Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, Crobat often appears as part of cave environments, and it fits the role of a fast flying creature. In other games, it is often used as a common enemy or ally Pokemon, reinforcing its identity as part of the natural ecosystem rather than something rare and legendary. One of the quieter but interesting facts about Crobat is that it represents a type of evolution that Pokemon doesn't use as often anymore. Evolution through friendship for a Pokemon that isn't cute or baby-like. Friendship evolutions are often associated with adorable Pokemon, but Crobat is not adorable in the traditional sense. It's a bat with 4 wings and a serious expression. The fact that it evolves through friendship suggests that even intimidating Pokemon can bond with trainers, which is a nice world-building detail. Crobat's overall role in Pokemon history is as a reward for commitment. It takes one of the most common and sometimes disliked Pokemon lines and turns it into something genuinely useful. It is fast, reliable, and versatile. It can attack, pivot, heal, and resist certain threats. It can function in both casual playthroughs and competitive formats, depending on the generation. And maybe the most boring but satisfying truth about Crobat is that it is often better than people expect. Players who never trained Zubat might not realize how good Crobat can be, but players who do train it often end up surprised by how much they like it. It's the Pokemon equivalent of discovering that the thing you ignored for years is actually one of the most practical tools you could have had all along. Crobat doesn't need to be dramatic. It doesn't need a legendary story. It doesn't need to be rare. It just needs to be fast, dependable, and quietly effective. And for a Pokemon that started life as a cave nuisance, that's a pretty impressive transformation. Sometimes a Pokemon doesn't exist because the world needed it, but because the franchise wanted to look back at something iconic and make it even more marketable, even cuter, and even more connected to the idea of raising a Pokemon from the very beginning. Pichu is one of the clearest examples of that. It's a tiny pre-evolution of Pikachu, introduced in Generation 2, and it represents a moment in Pokemon history where the series started expanding backward as well as forward, adding baby Pokemon that made familiar evolution lines feel deeper and more complete. Pichu is an electric-type Pokemon introduced in Generation 2. It evolves into Pikachu through friendship, meaning it becomes Pikachu when it has a high bond with its trainer. This is important because it makes Pichu one of the earliest examples of a baby Pokemon that evolves not by leveling up, but by being cared for and used consistently. Pichu's existence is closely tied to the idea of Pokemon breeding, which was introduced in Generation 2 as well. In the Johto games, baby Pokemon, like Pichu, were often obtained through eggs, making them feel like something you raised from birth. Pichu is the first stage of the Pikachu line. The evolution chain goes Pichu to Pikachu to Raichu. In Generation 1, Pikachu was the base form and Raichu was the evolution. Generation 2 added Pichu as a new base form, making Pikachu a middle stage. This was a big deal because Pikachu was already the mascot of the entire franchise. Adding a pre-evolution to the mascot line felt like Pokemon was saying, even the most famous Pokemon can be part of a larger family. Round, design-wise, Pichu is basically a smaller, rounder version of Pikachu with slightly different ear shapes. Pichu's ears are often drawn with black tips that look jagged or uneven, giving it a more baby-like and slightly messy appearance. Its body is tiny, its face is simple, and it has a playful expression that makes it look curious rather than confident. Pikachu feels like a capable little creature. Pichu feels like a baby that is still figuring out how electricity even works. Pichu's Pokédex entries often emphasize that it is not good at controlling its electricity. Many descriptions say that it can shock itself or that it releases electricity accidentally when it gets excited or surprised. This is a very important part of Pichu's identity because it creates a clear personality difference between it and Pikachu. Pikachu is usually portrayed as skilled and controlled. Pichu is portrayed as clumsy and unpredictable. It's not malicious, it's just inexperienced. This idea of Pichu shocking itself is one of those small lore details that makes it feel more real. It's like a baby animal that hasn't learned how to use its body properly yet. Pichu has power, but it doesn't know how to handle it. That creates a cute and slightly funny image, but it also reinforces the concept of training and growth in Pokemon. You start with something weak and chaotic, and through time and care, it becomes strong and reliable. Pichu's evolution method through friendship fits this perfectly. Friendship evolution is not about grinding levels. It's about spending time together. It's about walking, battling, healing, and keeping the Pokemon happy. That means when your Pichu becomes Pikachu, it feels like it happened because you raised it well, not because you just fought enough random battles. In the Johto games, Pichu was not always easy to obtain. While you could sometimes catch one in later games, in Pokemon Gold and Silver, the main way to get Pichu was through breeding. If you bred a Pikachu or Raichu, you could hatch a Pichu. This required access to the daycare and an understanding of the egg system. That made Pichu feel like a reward for players who engaged with the new mechanics. It wasn't just another wild encounter, it was a Pokemon you created. The breeding system itself was a major addition in Generation 2. It introduced the idea that Pokemon could produce eggs, and that eggs could hatch into baby Pokemon. This was a big step in making the Pokemon world feel more like an ecosystem. Pichu was part of that. It was one of the first baby Pokemon that made breeding feel meaningful. Pichu also became a symbol of Generation 2's new focus on smaller, cuter Pokemon. Johto introduced several baby Pokemon, including Cleffa, Igglybuff, Togepi, Tyrogue, and others. These Pokemon were designed to appeal to players who liked the cute side of Pokemon, and they also expanded evolution lines that were already familiar. Pichu fit perfectly into that trend. In terms of gameplay, Pichu is not a strong Pokemon. Its stats are low, and it is fragile. This is normal for baby Pokemon. They are not meant to be powerful. They are meant to be early stages that become stronger later. But because Pichu evolves into Pikachu, which is a decent Pokemon, it can still be worth using if you want the full evolution experience. Pichu's move pool is similar to Pikachu's, but often weaker at first. It can learn moves like Thundershock, Charm, and Tail Whip. Charm is an interesting move because it sharply lowers the opponent's attack, and it fits Pichu's baby-like theme. It's not fighting with strength, it's disarming the opponent. It's a move that feels more like a baby Pokemon trying to survive than trying to dominate. Pichu can also learn Sweet Kiss in some generations, which causes confusion. Sweet Kiss is another move that fits the baby theme because it's not a direct attack. It's a cute distraction that makes the opponent stumble. These moves reinforce the idea that Pichu is not meant to overpower enemies. It's meant to be small and tricky. In later generations, Pichu gained access to a special form, Spiky-Eared Pichu. This version appeared in Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver and had a unique look with a spiky ear. Spiky-Eared Pichu was tied to special events and had unique properties, including being unable to evolve. This made it more of a collectible Pokemon than a practical one, but it added to Pichu's legacy as a Pokemon that can have special variants. Pichu also has a strong presence in the anime and movies. One of the most famous appearances is in the Pokemon movie featuring Pikachu and Pichu, where Pichu characters play a major role. This helped make Pichu recognizable even to people who didn't play the games deeply. Pichu became part of the Pikachu family in pop culture. It was like Pokemon was saying, "Here is Pikachu's baby form, and it's adorable." Pichu's popularity also extended into other media, like Super Smash Bros. Pichu was introduced as a playable character in Super Smash Bros. Melee. This was surprising because Pichu is not a strong Pokemon in the games, but in Smash, it became a fast, lightweight fighter with electric attacks. Pichu had a unique gimmick in Smash. Its electric attacks damaged itself slightly, reflecting the Pokédex lore that Pichu shocks itself. This is a great example of Pokemon lore being translated into gameplay mechanics in another franchise. That Smash Bros. Portrayal also made Pichu famous in a different way. Many players who didn't care about Pichu in Pokemon games suddenly knew Pichu because it was a playable character. It became part of gaming culture beyond Pokemon. In the main series, Pichu's role has remained fairly consistent. It is the baby stage of Pikachu. It evolves through friendship. It is small, fragile, and cute. It often appears in games that include breeding mechanics, and it is sometimes found in the wild in later generations, as Pokemon became more generous with baby Pokemon encounters. One of the more interesting things about Pichu is how it changes the perception of Pikachu. Pikachu is often seen as the beginner-friendly mascot Pokemon, but with Pichu existing, Pikachu becomes the middle stage, implying that Pikachu itself is not the beginning. This creates a slightly different framing. Pikachu becomes something you grow into, rather than something you start with. That's a subtle shift, but it affects how the evolution line feels. Pichu also has a connection to the Light Ball item. Light Ball is an item that boosts Pikachu's attack and special attack, making Pikachu much stronger. In later generations, breeding mechanics involving Light Ball allowed Pikachu to pass down certain special moves to Pichu, such as Volt Tackle. Volt Tackle is a powerful electric-type move that causes recoil damage, and it became a signature move for the Pikachu line. The fact that Pichu could hatch with Volt Tackle if the parent held a Light Ball made Pichu more valuable for players who wanted a strong Pikachu or Raichu. Volt Tackle is another example of how Pichu's existence ties into deeper mechanics. Pichu is not just cute, it is part of the breeding system, part of move inheritance, part of item-based strategies. It adds depth to the Pikachu line beyond what existed in Generation 1. Pichu's typing as electric is straightforward, but it still gives it a few interesting traits. Electric types are only weak to ground, which is a good defensive trait. However, Pichu's low stats mean it can still faint easily to almost anything. But the ground weakness becomes relevant in the sense that Pichu's electricity is still grounded by the earth, fitting the theme of electricity needing grounding. In Pokemon Go, Pichu is typically obtained through eggs rather than wild encounters, which matches its baby Pokemon identity. Players often hatch Pichu rather than catching it. This makes it feel like a reward Pokemon in Go as well. Pichu can also wear special hats in event versions, which became a running trend in Pokemon Go and further boosted its collectible appeal. Over time, Pichu has remained one of the most recognizable baby Pokemon because it is tied to Pikachu. Even if you don't know many baby Pokemon, you probably know Pichu. It is the baby version of the mascot, and that alone gives it a permanent place in Pokemon history. Pichu is also an example of Pokemon's ability to expand its world without changing the core. Adding Pichu didn't change Pikachu. Pikachu stayed Pikachu, but it added context. It added the idea that Pikachu had a childhood stage, that it wasn't always the confident electric mouse everyone knows. It started out as something smaller, clumsier, and less controlled, and that idea fits perfectly with the overall theme of Pokemon: growth, training, and transformation over time. So Pichu remains what it has always been: a tiny electric Pokemon that shocks itself when it gets excited, a baby that can't fully control its own power yet, and a reminder that even the most famous Pokemon in the world started out small. There are some Pokemon that feel like they were designed to be useful first and memorable second, and Ampharos is a great example of that kind of quiet success. It's not flashy in the way legendary Pokemon are flashy, and it doesn't have an aggressive or intimidating look, but it has been a steady, reliable electric-type Pokemon since Generation 2. Ampharos is the kind of Pokemon that ends up being remembered, not because it looks powerful, but because it consistently helps players through long stretches of a journey, lighting the way in more ways than one. Ampharos is an electric-type Pokemon introduced in Generation 2. It evolves from Flaffy at level 30, and Flaffy evolves from Mareep at level 15. This makes the entire Mareep line fairly easy to complete during a normal playthrough. Mareep is available relatively early in Johto, which means you can catch one, train it, and have an Ampharos by the mid-game without needing special items or complicated evolution methods. That early availability is one of the reasons Ampharos became so popular. It's accessible, and it stays useful. The evolution line itself is very consistent in terms of theme. Mareep is a small sheep Pokemon with a fluffy wool body and a glowing tail. Flaffy becomes more upright and slightly less fluffy, and Ampharos becomes taller and more streamlined, almost like a bipedal creature rather than a simple animal. The line starts as a sheep and ends as something that feels almost like a mascot creature. Ampharos still has sheep-like origins, but it looks more like a friendly electric lighthouse Pokemon than a farm animal. Ampharos's design is simple but distinct. It is usually yellow with black stripes, and it has a red orb on its forehead and another red orb on its tail. Those orbs are important because they are directly tied to Ampharos's role in the Pokemon world. Ampharos is known for its bright light. In the Johto games, Ampharos is used as the lighthouse Pokemon in Olivine City. This is one of the most famous story roles for any non-legendary Pokemon, because it makes Ampharos feel like a real part of the world rather than just a battle creature. The Olivine City Lighthouse story is one of the most memorable side plots in Pokemon Gold and Silver. The lighthouse's Ampharos, known as Amphi, becomes sick, and the light goes out, causing problems for ships at sea. The player is asked to help by traveling to Cianwood City to obtain medicine. This quest is small, but it gives Ampharos a unique identity. It isn't just an electric-type Pokemon. It's a beacon, a guardian of the coast, a creature that keeps sailors safe. That lighthouse association has followed Ampharos ever since. Even in games where the lighthouse plot doesn't appear, many fans still think of Ampharos as the lighthouse Pokemon. It's one of the best examples of how a single story moment can define a Pokemon's legacy. In terms of typing, Ampharos is a pure electric type. Electric types are generally useful because they have only one weakness, ground, and they resist electric, flying, and steel. That means Ampharos can often switch into certain attacks safely, especially against flying types and water types that rely on electric weakness. Electric is also a strong offensive type because it hits water and flying super effectively, and those types are extremely common in Pokemon. Ampharos's stats are built around special attack. Ampharos has traditionally had high special attack and decent bulk, but it is not very fast. This creates a very specific playstyle. Ampharos is not going to outspeed many opponents. Instead, it tends to take a hit and then hit back with a strong special move like Thunderbolt. This makes Ampharos feel like a slow but powerful electric cannon. Because Ampharos is not fast, it often benefits from being bulky enough to survive attacks. Ampharos's HP and defense are usually decent, allowing it to take physical hits better than some other electric types. Its special defense is also decent, making it a fairly balanced Pokemon overall. It's not fragile, and that reliability is one of its strengths in story playthroughs. Ampharos's move pool includes many classic electric moves, Thundershock early on, then Thunderbolt, Thunder, and later moves like Discharge. Thunderbolt is usually the main move Ampharos uses because it is strong and reliable. Thunder is more powerful but less accurate, making it riskier. Ampharos can also learn moves like Thunder Wave, which paralyzes the opponent. Thunder Wave is extremely useful because paralysis slows opponents down, which helps Ampharos compensate for its low speed. Thunder Wave also fits Ampharos's supportive role. Ampharos isn't just a damage dealer. It can also control battles by slowing down threats and making them easier for the team to handle. In many playthroughs, Ampharos becomes the Pokemon that you use to weaken and paralyze strong opponents before finishing them off. Ampharos can also learn moves like Light Screen, which reduces damage from special attacks for the team. Light Screen fits Ampharos's theme of light and protection. It's another example of Pokemon design matching mechanics. Ampharos uses light to protect its allies, both in story lore and in battle mechanics. Another interesting part of Ampharos's move pool is that it can learn some coverage moves that make it more versatile. Ampharos can learn moves like Fire Punch in some generations, which is useful for hitting grass types that resist electric. It can also learn Signal Beam in some games, giving it bug-type coverage. This makes Ampharos more adaptable than some other electric types that only rely on electric attacks. Ampharos's abilities are fairly straightforward. It commonly has Static, which can paralyze opponents that make contact with it. Static is a classic electric-type ability, and it fits Ampharos well because it is bulky enough to take hits. If an opponent uses a physical move, they might get paralyzed, which is useful. Ampharos's hidden ability is Plus in some generations, which boosts its special attack when paired with a Pokémon with Minus. This is mostly relevant in double battles, but it's not Ampharos's most famous trait. One of Ampharos's biggest moments in later Pokémon history came when it received a Mega Evolution in Generation 6. Mega Ampharos becomes an electric and dragon-type Pokémon. This was surprising to many fans, because Ampharos doesn't look like a dragon, but the Mega form gives it long, flowing hair and a more mystical appearance, almost like an ancient guardian creature. The dragon typing also changes its battle role, giving it new resistances and weaknesses and making it more powerful overall. Mega Ampharos also boosted Ampharos's popularity because it gave Ampharos a dramatic new look. Ampharos had always been a calm, friendly Pokémon. Mega Ampharos turned it into something that looked regal and powerful. The long hair became one of the most talked about parts of the design because it made Mega Ampharos look like it had become a glamorous electric dragon sheep. Even though Mega Evolution is not present in every modern game, Mega Ampharos remains part of Ampharos's legacy. It's one of those mega forms that people remember because it was unexpected and visually distinct. Ampharos's role in competitive battling has varied depending on the generation. Ampharos's low speed often makes it difficult to use in high-level competitive formats because fast Pokémon dominate many battles. However, Ampharos's bulk and special attack can still give it a niche, especially in lower tiers or specific formats. It can function as a bulky electric-type attacker, spreading paralysis and hitting hard with Thunderbolt. In some generations, Ampharos can also use moves like Volt Switch, which allows it to attack and then switch out. Volt Switch is similar to U-Turn, but for electric types. Ampharos's low speed means it often moves last, which can actually be useful because it allows you to switch after seeing what the opponent does. This makes Ampharos a slow pivot, which is a valuable role. Ampharos is also known for being one of the more friendly-looking electric types. Many electric Pokémon have sharp, aggressive designs. Ampharos looks approachable. It looks like something you could hug, even though it can electrocute you. This friendly design is part of why Ampharos became a fan favorite. It feels like a companion Pokémon, not just a battle weapon. In the anime, Ampharos has appeared multiple times, often in roles related to its lighthouse identity. It is usually portrayed as helpful and calm. The anime reinforces the idea that Ampharos is not a wild, chaotic, electric type like some others. It is controlled, reliable, and responsible. Ampharos also appears in many spin-off games, often as a supportive or recognizable electric type. In Pokémon Mystery Dungeon, it sometimes appears as a character with a guiding or helpful role. In other spin-offs, it appears as a standard Pokémon, but it remains recognizable because of its simple design. Another small but interesting detail about Ampharos is its name origin. Ampharos is likely a combination of amp, referencing electricity, and pharos, referencing the lighthouse of Alexandria, one of the most famous lighthouses in history. This name is a clever nod to Ampharos's lighthouse role, and it shows that Pokemon naming sometimes includes hidden references. Ampharos's Pokédex entries often mention its light being visible from far away. Some entries say that it can be seen from space, or that it shines so brightly it can guide lost travelers. Again, Pokemon exaggerates, but the idea is consistent. Ampharos also has a small connection to the idea of communication. In some lore, its light is used to signal ships. This makes Ampharos feel like part of human society in the Pokemon world. It's not just living in the wild, it's working with people. That partnership theme makes Ampharos feel especially warm and grounded. Over the years, Ampharos has remained one of the most consistently liked electric types. It isn't always the strongest, it isn't always the fastest, but it is dependable, easy to obtain, and tied to one of the most memorable side stories in Pokemon history. It represents the idea that not every Pokemon needs to be dramatic to be important. Some Pokemon matter because they help, because they guide, and because they quietly stay useful no matter how many new creatures are introduced. And that's Ampharos, a gentle electric beacon that started as a fluffy sheep, grew into a lighthouse guardian, and became one of the most quietly iconic Pokemon in Johto. Sudowoodo is one of those Pokemon that feels like it was designed around a single joke, and then the series committed to that joke so hard that it became a permanent and oddly lovable part of Pokemon history. The entire concept of Sudowoodo is simple. It looks like a tree, but it isn't a tree. It's a rock-type Pokemon pretending to be a plant. And that idea alone has been enough to keep it memorable for decades, because it shows up in the world in a way that feels like a real obstacle, not just another creature you battle and move past. Sudowoodo was introduced in Generation 2 as a pure rock-type Pokemon. It evolves from Bonsly in later generations, but originally it had no pre-evolution. In Pokemon Gold and Silver, Sudowoodo is most famous for blocking the path on Route 36. It stands there in the middle of the road, looking like a strange tree that doesn't belong. It doesn't move. It doesn't battle you automatically. It just exists as a barrier, forcing you to interact with it and solve the problem. This is one of the earliest examples of Pokemon using a specific creature as a story gate. You can't just walk past it. You have to figure out how to deal with it. The game gives you clues through NPC dialogue that it doesn't like water, and eventually you're given the squirt bottle item to sprinkle water on it. When you do, the tree suddenly attacks, revealing itself as Sudowoodo. It's a small moment, but it's extremely memorable because it feels like you discovered something hidden in plain sight. The squirt bottle encounter is one of those moments that Johto players often remember clearly. It's not a legendary battle, it's not a gym leader, it's just a weird tree that turns out to be alive. But it makes the world feel clever, like there are secrets and oddities that you have to pay attention to. It also introduces the idea that not every obstacle is a locked door. Sometimes the obstacle is a Pokemon itself. Sudowoodo's name is also part of the joke. Pseudo means fake, and wood is obvious. Sudowoodo is literally fake wood. The Japanese name Usaki combines words related to lying and trees. The concept is consistent across languages. This is a liar tree Pokemon. Design-wise, Sudowoodo looks like a stylized tree with a trunk-like body, branch-like arms, and green spheres at the ends of its arms that resemble leaves. It has a simple face with small eyes and a mouth that often looks slightly surprised or neutral. It doesn't look threatening. It looks like a cartoon tree that decided to stand up and start walking around. But despite its appearance, Sudowoodo is a rock type, not a grass type. This is important for both gameplay and lore. Rock-type Pokemon resist normal and flying moves, and they are strong against fire, ice, flying, and bug, but they are weak to water, grass, fighting, ground, and steel. Sudowoodo's weakness to water is especially important because the game uses water to force it to move. That's not just a gameplay mechanic, it's part of its identity. Sudowoodo's Pokédex entries often mention that it disguises itself as a tree to avoid being attacked. It stands still and blends into forests, pretending to be part of the environment. This is a real-world animal behavior concept, similar to camouflage. Some animals pretend to be sticks or leaves to avoid predators. Sudowoodo is Pokemon's exaggerated version of that, a rock creature pretending to be a tree. The entries also often mention that Sudowoodo hates water. It doesn't like rain. It doesn't like being sprayed. It tries to avoid wet environments. This is funny because trees usually like water, but Sudowoodo isn't a real tree. It's a rock. Water erodes rock. Water is dangerous to it. So the thing it pretends to be would benefit from water, but the thing it actually is gets harmed by it. That contradiction is the core of Sudowoodo's charm. In battle, Sudowoodo has traditionally been a physical attacker and defender. Its attack stat is decent, and its defense is usually solid. It can take physical hits better than many Pokemon, and it can hit back with strong rock-type moves. Sudowoodo's speed is usually low, meaning it often moves after opponents, but it can still be effective if it survives hits and uses strong attacks like Rock Slide or Stone Edge. Sudowoodo's move pool includes many rock-type moves, as expected, but it also includes some surprising options. Sudowoodo can learn moves like Low Kick, which is a fighting-type move that deals damage based on the opponent's weight. It can learn Earthquake, one of the strongest ground-type moves in the game. It can also learn moves like Double Edge, which is a powerful normal-type move that causes recoil. These moves make Sudowoodo more versatile than you might expect from a Pokemon that looks like a simple joke character. One of Sudowoodo's signature moves in some contexts is Mimic, or copycat-related moves, which fit its theme of imitation. It's a Pokemon that pretends to be something else, so moves that involve copying opponents feel appropriate. Even if these moves aren't always the most practical, they match the concept. Sudowoodo's ability options include Sturdy and Rockhead in many generations. Sturdy prevents it from being knocked out in one hit when at full health, which can help it survive strong attacks. Rockhead prevents recoil damage from moves like Double Edge, which is useful because Sudowoodo can use recoil moves without hurting itself. Sudowoodo's hidden ability is Rattled in some generations, which raises speed when hit by certain moves like Bug, Dark, or Ghost. That's an interesting ability because it implies Sudowoodo gets startled and starts moving faster. Sudowoodo's role in the Johto story is unique because it's optional in a way that matters. When you battle it on Route 36, you can catch it. It's one of the first special encounter Pokemon that feels like a one-time event. If you knock it out or run away, you might lose the chance to catch it. That makes it feel more special than a random wild Pokemon. It's not legendary, but it's a unique encounter. Sudowoodo also appears in other games in similar ways, often as a blocking Pokemon or a special encounter. This became part of its identity. When players see Sudowoodo in the overworld, they often expect it to be an obstacle. It's like a living roadblock Pokemon. In later generations, Sudowoodo gained a pre-evolution, Bonsly, introduced in Generation 4. Bonsly is a baby Pokemon that looks like a tiny version of Sudowoodo, with a rounder body and a similar fake tree design. Bonsly evolves into Sudowoodo when it learns Mimic and levels up. This is a very specific evolution requirement, and it's another joke-based detail. Bonsly learns Mimic, the move that copies others, and then it becomes the ultimate imitation tree Pokemon. The Bonsly evolution requirement is also one of those mechanics that makes players pause and think. It's not just level up, it's learn the move that matches your theme. That makes it memorable. It also makes Bonsly slightly annoying to evolve if you don't know the requirement, but it's still a clever idea. Sudowoodo's presence in the anime also helped cement its popularity. One of the most famous Sudowoodo characters is Brock's Sudowoodo, which was originally a Bonsly that followed him around. This Pokemon became a recurring companion, and its personality was playful and expressive. It often cried fake tears, referencing the idea of being a pseudo-Pokemon. The anime gave Sudowoodo a lot of personality, which made it more beloved. In the anime, Sudowoodo's fake tree nature was often used for jokes, but it also showed that Sudowoodo can be surprisingly strong in battle. The anime often portrays Sudowoodo using moves like Rock Throw or Mimic, and it fits the role of a quirky but capable Pokemon. In Pokemon Go, Sudowoodo is often found in events or certain areas, and it can be a fun Pokemon to use in certain leagues. Its rock typing gives it strengths against fire and flying types, but it also has weaknesses that make it risky. Still, it's one of those Pokemon that many players catch simply because it's recognizable and funny. Sudowoodo's shiny form is also interesting. It changes its brown body into a more reddish or golden tone, and its green spheres may shift color slightly. Shiny Sudowoodo stands out because the normal form already looks unusual, so the shiny feels even more strange and collectible. Sudowoodo has also appeared in many spin-off games, often as a character that fits the odd obstacle role. In Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, Sudowoodo sometimes appears as a blocking character or a strange creature you meet in forests. It fits that vibe perfectly. In Pokemon Ranger and other spin-offs, Sudowoodo's tree disguise concept is often used in small ways. Another quiet detail about Sudowoodo is that it is categorized as the imitation Pokemon. This is one of the most accurate category names in the series. Many Pokemon category names feel random or generic, but imitation Pokemon tells you exactly what Sudowoodo is about. Sudowoodo's existence also highlights something interesting about Pokemon's type system. Sudowoodo looks like a grass type, but it's rock type. This is a reminder that Pokemon types are not always visually obvious. Some Pokemon have types that don't match their appearance. Sudowoodo is one of the earliest and most famous examples of that mismatch, and it taught players early on not to judge types purely by looks. In battle, this can trick new players. They might assume Sudowoodo is grass type and use fire moves, only to find out it resists fire because it's rock type. That kind of surprise is part of what made Sudowoodo memorable. It's a Pokemon that teaches you to pay attention. Sudowoodo's overall stats and competitive viability have never made it a top-tier Pokemon, but it has always been usable. It can hit hard, take hits, and use strong moves like Earthquake and Rock Slide. In some formats, it can even use moves like Stealth Rock, setting up hazards, but its low speed and common weaknesses usually keep it from being dominant. Still, Sudowoodo doesn't need to be dominant. It exists as a concept Pokemon. It exists as a world-building Pokemon. It's the creature that stands in the road pretending to be a tree. It's the Pokemon that hates water even though it looks like it should love it. It's the imitation Pokemon that turns camouflage into a personality trait. And that's why Sudowoodo has lasted. It's not just a rock creature, it's a joke that became a character, a simple idea that became a memorable moment in Johto. A fake tree that, once you sprinkle it with water, stands up and reveals itself as something entirely different. Wobbuffet is one of the strangest Pokemon ever created, and it somehow manages to be both extremely simple and extremely complicated at the same time. On the surface, Wobbuffet looks like a tall, blue, rounded creature with tiny arms and a blank expression, almost like it doesn't have a single thought in its head. It stands there quietly, barely moving, like a Pokemon that forgot what it was supposed to do. But the moment you actually try to use it in battle, you realize Wobbuffet is not built like a normal Pokemon at all. It's built around one idea: take whatever the opponent does to you and send it right back. Wobbuffet was introduced in Generation 2 as a Psychic-type Pokemon. It evolves from Wynot, which was introduced later in Generation 3 as its baby form. In the original Johto games, Wobbuffet had no pre-evolution, so it appeared as a fully formed Pokemon with no obvious context. That made it feel even weirder. It wasn't part of a familiar line, and it didn't look like anything else. It was just Wobbuffet, a blue punching bag with a tail. That tail is one of the most important parts of Wobbuffet's design. Wobbuffet's body is blue, but its tail is black, and the tail has two small eye-like spots on it. This is not just decoration. The Pokédex often suggests that Wobbuffet's true body might actually be the tail, or that the tail is the part that hides its real nature. Some entries imply that Wobbuffet keeps its tail hidden to avoid being attacked, and that the tail is sensitive or important. This gives Wobbuffet a slightly unsettling vibe if you think about it too much. The blue body might be a decoy, and the black tail might be the real creature. Wobbuffet's name also adds to its identity. In Japanese, it is called Sonins, which is tied to a phrase meaning something like, "that's the way it is," which fits Wobbuffet's passive, accepting nature. In English, Wobbuffet sounds like a mix of wobble and buffet, which fits the idea of it getting hit repeatedly. It's like a Pokemon designed to take a buffet of attacks. In terms of stats, Wobbuffet is extremely unusual. It has one of the highest HP stats in the game, but its other stats are very low. Its attack and special attack are almost non-existent. Its defense and special defense are not amazing either, though they are not terrible. But the key is that Wobbuffet doesn't rely on normal attacking stats. It relies on reflecting damage back at the opponent. Wobbuffet's entire battle identity is built around a small set of moves: Counter, Mirror Coat, Safeguard, Destiny Bond, and later moves like Encore in some formats. Counter reflects physical damage back at the opponent for double the damage. Mirror Coat reflects special damage back at the opponent for double the damage. Destiny Bond can take the opponent down with Wobbuffet if Wobbuffet faints. Safeguard protects against status conditions, and Encore can lock the opponent into repeating a move. This move set is weird because it means Wobbuffet can't attack normally. It can't just use Thunderbolt or Psychic or Flamethrower. It has to wait, it has to be hit, and then it responds. That makes Wobbuffet feel like a reactive Pokemon, not a proactive one. It doesn't start fights, it finishes them. This is why Wobbuffet is often described as a trap Pokemon. It doesn't win by overpowering, it wins by surviving and punishing. If the opponent uses a physical move, Wobbuffet can counter. If the opponent uses a special move, Wobbuffet can Mirror Coat. If the opponent tries to set up, Wobbuffet can Encore and force them to repeat something useless. It's like a Pokemon that exists to say, "Whatever you do, I will make you regret it." Wobbuffet's ability is also central to its identity. Wobbuffet's signature ability is Shadow Tag. Shadow Tag prevents the opponent from switching out. This is one of the most powerful abilities in the entire series because switching is a core mechanic in Pokemon battles. Being able to trap an opponent means you can control the matchup and force them to stay in a losing situation. Wobbuffet with Shadow Tag can trap an opponent, take a hit, and then reflect it back for a knockout. Shadow Tag is so powerful that Wobbuffet has been banned or restricted in many competitive formats over the years. It's not because Wobbuffet is strong in a normal sense. It's because trapping is inherently oppressive. If you can't switch, you lose one of your biggest tools for counterplay. Wobbuffet turns battles into a guessing game. Will it counter or mirror coat? And if you guess wrong, you lose. This is also why Wobbuffet is sometimes considered one of the most frustrating Pokemon to fight. It can force you into situations where you have no good options. If you attack, you risk being reflected. If you don't attack, you might get encored or stalled. If you try to switch, you can't. It's a Pokemon that punishes the basic act of playing the game normally. Wobbuffet's relationship with Destiny Bond is also important. Destiny Bond can be used as a last resort. If Wobbuffet is low on health and you know it will faint, you can use Destiny Bond and take the opponent down with you. This makes Wobbuffet dangerous even when it's about to lose. It can turn a losing situation into a trade, which can be valuable in competitive play. In story playthroughs, Wobbuffet is less common as a team member because it requires a specific style of play that many casual players don't enjoy. It doesn't learn many moves. It doesn't have flashy attacks. It doesn't evolve. It's not the kind of Pokemon you use to sweep through trainers quickly, but it can still be useful in certain situations, especially against strong opponents who rely on one big attack. Wobbuffet can survive that attack and reflect it back. In Pokemon Gold and Silver, Wobbuffet can be found in the wild in certain caves, such as the Dark Cave in some versions, and it can also appear in other areas depending on the game. Finding one in the wild can feel surprising because it looks so out of place compared to other Pokemon. It's like you stumbled into a creature that doesn't belong in nature. Wobbuffet's Pokédex entries often describe it as a Pokemon that hates light and prefers dark places. Some entries mention that it lives in caves and only comes out at night. This fits with the idea of it being passive and hidden. It doesn't want attention. It doesn't want conflict. It just wants to stand quietly in the dark. But if something attacks it, it responds with overwhelming retaliation. Another recurring detail is that Wobbuffet is said to dislike attacking first. It prefers to endure and then strike back. This is basically a lore explanation for counter and mirror coat. It's also why Wobbuffet is sometimes associated with patience. It is literally a patience Pokemon. It waits. Wobbuffet's physical design reinforces this. It has tiny arms that look useless for attacking. It has a blank face that doesn't show emotion. It stands like a punching bag. It looks like it was built to be hit. That design is funny, but it's also extremely consistent with its mechanics. Wobbuffet is one of the best examples of Pokemon design matching gameplay. In the anime, Wobbuffet became famous because of Team Rocket. Jesse's Wobbuffet is one of the most iconic recurring Pokemon in the anime. It often pops out of its Pokeball unexpectedly, says its name in a dramatic way, and then gets hit by something. It's used as comic relief, but it also reinforces Wobbuffet's identity as a Pokemon that takes hits. Team Rocket's Wobbuffet also became famous for the way it salutes, adding even more humor to the character. It's like a Pokemon that is loyal, enthusiastic, and completely unbothered by being thrown into danger. That portrayal made Wobbuffet beloved by many fans who might otherwise find it weird. The anime also played with Wobbuffet's mechanics sometimes, showing it using counter or mirror coat in dramatic moments. Even though the anime doesn't always follow game mechanics perfectly, Wobbuffet's identity as a reflector Pokemon remained consistent. Wobbuffet's pre-evolution, Wynot, was introduced in Generation 3. Wynot is a baby Pokemon that evolves into Wobbuffet through friendship. Wynot looks like a smaller, cuter version of Wobbuffet with a similar tail. Adding Why Not made Wobbuffet feel less like a random creature and more like part of a line. It also reinforced the idea that Wobbuffet is something you can raise, even if it still evolves into something strange. Why Not's existence also makes Wobbuffet's design feel more natural. Wobbuffet becomes the adult form of a baby Pokemon. That makes its simple face and rounded body feel more like a grown-up version of something cute rather than a random blob. In Pokemon Go, Wobbuffet is a Pokemon that many players encounter through events or eggs, especially Why Not. Wobbuffet is bulky, but it isn't usually used as an attacker because of its low damage output. It still functions as a defensive Pokemon in some contexts, but it is mostly collected for its uniqueness. Wobbuffet's shiny form is also notable because it changes from blue to a brighter pink color. This shiny is extremely noticeable and has become popular among shiny hunters. A pink Wobbuffet is hard to miss, and it adds to the Pokemon's weird charm. Wobbuffet has also had an unusual history in competitive Pokemon because of how trapping works. Shadow Tag has been controversial, and Wobbuffet is one of the main reasons why. In some formats, Wobbuffet was banned because it could trap and eliminate key Pokemon too easily. In other formats, it was allowed but heavily prepared for. Wobbuffet's existence forced players to think differently about team building. Even outside of competitive play, Wobbuffet is memorable because it represents a Pokemon that doesn't follow the usual rules. Most Pokemon have a variety of moves. Most Pokemon can attack. Most Pokemon can be used in straightforward ways. Wobbuffet cannot. It is specialized to an extreme degree. It is one of the most gimmick-based Pokemon ever made, but it is a gimmick that works, and that's Wobbuffet. A Pokemon that stands still, waits, and reflects. A creature with massive HP and almost no offensive power, yet capable of defeating much stronger opponents through patience and punishment. It's simple in appearance, complicated in battle, and unforgettable in concept. Dunsparce is one of those Pokemon that feels like it was designed to confuse people on purpose, and then it became famous because of that confusion. When you first see Dunsparce, it doesn't look like anything particularly powerful. It doesn't look cute in an obvious mascot way, and it doesn't look cool in an intimidating way either. It looks like a strange little creature that someone drew from memory after hearing a description of several different animals at once. And yet, Dunsparce has become one of the most talked about ordinary Pokemon in the entire franchise, mostly because it spent decades being the subject of one long-running question: why does this Pokemon exist the way it does? Dunsparce was introduced in Generation 2 as a normal-type Pokemon. It has always been a single-stage Pokemon for most of its history, meaning it did not evolve into anything for a very long time. That alone made it stand out, because Dunsparce looks like it should evolve. It looks like an awkward early-stage creature that would eventually become something bigger and more impressive. But for years, it didn't. It stayed Dunsparce, forever stuck in its strange little form. In Pokemon Gold and Silver, Dunsparce is notable for being rare. It can be found in Dark Cave, but the encounter rate is low, which makes it feel like a secret. This is interesting because rare Pokemon are usually rare because they are strong or special. Dunsparce is rare, but it is not particularly strong. That made it feel mysterious. Why would the game hide this Pokemon if it wasn't going to reward you with something amazing? That mystery became part of Dunsparce's identity. It became a Pokemon that players searched for out of curiosity rather than usefulness. People wanted to find it because it felt like there must be something more to it. It felt like it was hiding a secret. Dunsparce's design is one of the most unusual in Generation 2. It has a pale yellow body with blue stripes, tiny wings, and a drill-like tail. Its face is simple, with small eyes and a slightly blank expression. It looks like a creature that lives underground and moves by burrowing, but it also has wings, which suggests it might fly. Except it doesn't really fly. The wings are tiny and seem useless. This combination of traits makes Dunsparce feel like an unfinished idea, but it's actually based on real-world mythology and animals. One of the inspirations for Dunsparce is the Tsuchinoko, a Japanese cryptid. The Tsuchinoko is often described as a snake-like creature with a thick body, sometimes with small limbs or unusual features. It is a legendary creature that people claim to have seen, but it remains mysterious and elusive. Dunsparce, being rare and weird, fits that inspiration perfectly. It's a cryptid Pokemon. It's supposed to feel like something you aren't sure is real. The Tsuchinoko inspiration also explains Dunsparce's body shape. It's not a normal snake. It's thick and rounded. It looks like a creature that could roll or wiggle rather than slither smoothly. That awkwardness is part of the point. Dunsparce is not meant to be sleek. It's meant to be strange. Dunsparce's Pokédex entries often emphasize that it lives underground. Many descriptions mention that it digs tunnels and creates nests deep in the earth. Some entries say that it uses its tail like a drill to burrow. This fits the drill tail design. It also fits the idea of a cryptid creature hiding underground, only rarely seen by humans. The Pokédex also sometimes mentions that Dunsparce can float or glide slightly using its wings, but it isn't a true flying Pokémon. The wings are more like stabilizers, helping it move through tunnels or escape danger in short bursts. This is a clever way to explain why it has wings without making it a flying type. Despite being a normal type, Dunsparce has a surprisingly interesting move pool. It can learn moves like Glare, which paralyzes the opponent. Glare is usually associated with snake-like Pokemon, and it fits Dunsparce's cryptid snake identity. It can also learn moves like Headbutt, which is fitting because Dunsparce has a rounded head and looks like it could ram into things. One of Dunsparce's most famous moves is Serene Grace combined with flinching attacks. Dunsparce can have the ability Serene Grace, which doubles the chance of additional effects occurring. This means moves with flinch chances or status chances become more reliable. Dunsparce can learn moves like Rock Slide in some generations, which has a flinch chance, and with Serene Grace, that flinch chance becomes much higher. This gave Dunsparce a strange niche. It could annoy opponents by flinching them repeatedly. Dunsparce can also learn moves like Body Slam, which has a chance to paralyze. With Serene Grace, that paralysis chance increases as well. This means Dunsparce can spread paralysis easily. Paralysis lowers speed and sometimes prevents movement entirely. Combined with flinching, Dunsparce can create a very frustrating situation for opponents. Even though Dunsparce isn't strong, it can win battles through annoyance. This is one of the most interesting things about Dunsparce. It is not powerful in the traditional sense, but it can still be effective because of how it uses mechanics. It is a Pokemon that survives through weirdness, not strength. Dunsparce's stats are generally low and balanced, with no standout offensive power. It has decent HP, but its attack and defense are not impressive. Its speed is low. Its special stats are average. This makes it feel like a normal Pokemon, fitting its normal typing. It's not a specialist, it's just there. But because it has access to disruptive moves and abilities, it can still be used in creative ways. Dunsparce's other ability, Run Away in some generations, is not useful in battle because it allows it to flee from wild encounters. This ability fits the idea of Dunsparce being elusive and hard to catch, but it doesn't help much competitively. Serene Grace is the ability that made Dunsparce famous among players who like strange strategies. Dunsparce also has a reputation for being a Pokemon that people wanted to evolve. For years, fans hoped Dunsparce would get an evolution in a later generation, turning it into something impressive. This became one of the longest-running fan desires in Pokemon history. People imagined Dunsparce evolving into a dragon, or into a giant burrowing serpent, or into something mythical. The fact that it didn't evolve made the desire stronger. Eventually, in Generation 9, Dunsparce finally got an evolution, Dudunsparce. Dudunsparce is essentially a longer Dunsparce, sometimes with extra segments. This evolution was both hilarious and controversial. Many fans expected something dramatic, but instead, they got more Dunsparce. The evolution was basically the joke continuing. Pokemon looked at decades of fan speculation and said, "No, it's still Dunsparce, just bigger." This evolution choice made Dunsparce even more iconic because it turned the Pokemon into a symbol of Pokemon's humor. Dunsparce was never meant to become a dragon. It was meant to remain strange and underwhelming. Dudunsparce was the ultimate confirmation of that. Dudunsparce also introduced a unique form mechanic where it can have different segment counts, adding a collectible element. This gave the evolution line more depth while still keeping the joke intact. It was a clever compromise. Fans got an evolution, but the evolution stayed true to Dunsparce's identity. In the anime, Dunsparce has appeared occasionally, usually as a quirky Pokemon with a strange personality. It is often portrayed as harmless and odd, sometimes cute in a weird way. It isn't a major star, but it fits into episodes that focus on unusual Pokemon. In Pokemon Go, Dunsparce has been part of events and has had some relevance in certain PvP formats because of its bulk and access to moves that can pressure opponents. It is not a top-tier Pokemon, but it has been surprisingly useful at times. This mirrors its main series identity, not strong, but not useless either. Dunsparce's shiny form is also notable. It changes from pale yellow to a more pinkish or slightly different tone, depending on the game. It's not the most dramatic shiny, but because Dunsparce itself is unusual, the shiny feels special. Another detail about Dunsparce is that it represents a type of Pokemon that exists purely for world texture. Not every Pokemon is meant to be powerful. Some Pokemon exist to make the world feel like a world. Dunsparce feels like something you might actually find in a cave, something weird and rare that isn't necessarily important to the grand story. It's just a creature that exists. That kind of Pokemon is important because it makes the world feel less like a collection of battle tools and more like an ecosystem. Dunsparce is a reminder that not every rare animal is a lion or an eagle. Sometimes the rare animal is just a strange little cryptid that lives underground. Dunsparce also fits the theme of Generation 2 being full of odd, experimental designs. Johto introduced many Pokemon that felt different from Generation 1, including unusual single-stage Pokemon like Shuckle and Smeargle. Dunsparce fits into that category. It's not meant to be sleek or heroic, it's meant to be weird. And that's Dunsparce, a rare normal-type cryptid snake with tiny wings and a drill tail, a Pokemon that spent decades as a mystery and a meme, and a creature that became beloved not because it was strong, but because it was strange. Steelix is one of the most satisfying evolutions in the entire Pokemon series, mostly because it feels like it turns an idea into its final, fully realized form. Onix has always been iconic because of its size and design, but for a long time it had a reputation for being weaker than it looked. Steelix fixed that. Steelix takes the concept of a giant rock snake and upgrades it into a giant metal snake, heavier, stronger, and far more intimidating, while also becoming one of the most defensively powerful Pokemon of its era. Steelix was introduced in Generation 2 as a steel and ground type Pokemon. It evolves from Onix, when Onix is traded while holding a metal coat. This method of evolution immediately made Steelix feel special. It wasn't something you could just level up into. You needed a specific item, and you needed to trade. Trade evolutions have always been a way Pokemon make certain creatures feel rarer or more valuable because they require cooperation between players. Steelix became one of those Pokemon that felt like a reward for having friends or for being willing to go through extra steps. The metal coat itself is also thematically perfect. It's literally a coating of metal. You give it to Onix, trade it, and Onix becomes Steelix. The concept is simple and satisfying. It's like Onix's body gets infused with metal during the evolution process, transforming it into something stronger. Steelix's design is a direct continuation of Onix, but with a major shift in material and tone. Onix is made of gray stone segments. Steelix is made of metallic segments, usually a light gray or steel color. Steelix also has sharper features, including more pronounced spikes and a more intimidating head. Its eyes look more intense. It feels like Onix's older, tougher sibling, even though it's technically the evolved form. Steelix is also enormous. It's one of the largest non-legendary Pokemon in terms of length, and its size helps sell the idea that this is a creature built for power and durability. Steelix looks like it could crush buildings simply by moving through them. It's a Pokemon that feels like a natural disaster with a face. The Pokédex entries for Steelix often emphasize that it lives deep underground. Many descriptions say that Steelix can dig through the earth, creating tunnels, and that it can live at extreme depths. Some entries mention that Steelix's body becomes harder and smoother the deeper it goes, and that its body is formed through pressure and heat. This is Pokemon taking a real-world concept pressure, changing materials underground, and turning it into fantasy biology. Some Pokédex entries also describe Steelix's body as being harder than diamond, which is a common exaggeration used for very tough Pokemon. The idea is consistent though. Steelix is not just metal, it's super metal. It's a living drill of nearly indestructible material. Steelix's steel typing was also a major deal when it was introduced. Generation 2 introduced the Steel type, and it changed Pokemon battling dramatically. Steel types have many resistances, making them extremely defensive. Steelix became one of the early examples of how strong Steel could be. With Steel typing, Steelix gained resistances to Normal, Flying, Rock, Bug, Steel, Psychic, Ice, Dragon, and more, depending on the generation. This made Steelix incredibly hard to damage, with many common attacks. Steelix's ground typing also adds important traits. Ground types are immune to electric attacks, which is useful because electric moves are common. Ground typing also gives Steelix strong offensive potential, with moves like Earthquake. So Steelix is not just a wall. It can also hit back with one of the strongest and most reliable moves in the game. Steelix's weaknesses are also worth noting. Steelix is weak to fire, water, fighting, and ground. Fire and water are very common types, which means Steelix has to be careful. But because Steelix's defense is so high, it can still sometimes survive even super effective physical hits, depending on the situation. Steelix's stats are heavily focused on defense. Steelix has one of the highest defense stats in the entire series. This makes it extremely good at taking physical attacks. If an opponent uses moves like Slash, Return, or Earthquake, Steelix can often shrug them off. Steelix's attack is also decent, allowing it to threaten opponents with strong physical moves. Its HP is not as high as some other bulky Pokemon, and its special defense is not amazing, but its physical durability is its defining trait. Steelix's speed is low, which is expected for a massive metal snake. It is not meant to be fast, it is meant to be heavy and unstoppable. This means Steelix often moves last, but that doesn't matter as much when it can survive hits and hit back hard. Steelix's move pool includes many classic physical moves. Earthquake is the most important because it is powerful and benefits from Steelix's ground typing. Steelix can also learn Iron Tail, which fits its steel typing. Iron Tail is strong, but not perfectly accurate, making it a bit risky. Steelix can also learn Rock Slide, giving it coverage against flying and fire types. It can learn Crunch in some generations, which gives it dark coverage. It can learn Explosion in older generations, which made it a dangerous threat because it could sacrifice itself to deal massive damage. Steelix can also learn moves like Screech, which lowers the opponent's defense sharply. Screech fits Steelix's intimidating presence. It's like Steelix roars, and the opponent becomes vulnerable. Steelix can also learn moves like Roar, which forces the opponent to switch out, and moves like Stealth Rock in later generations, which sets hazards. This makes Steelix useful as a support Pokemon, as well as a physical wall. Steelix's abilities include Rock Head and Sturdy in many generations. Rock Head prevents recoil damage, which can be useful for certain moves. Sturdy prevents Steelix from being knocked out in one hit when at full HP, making it even more reliable as a wall. Steelix's hidden ability in some generations is Sheer Force, which boosts the power of moves that have additional effects but removes those effects. Sheer Force can turn Steelix into a stronger attacker, though Steelix is more commonly used defensively. Steelix also received a Mega Evolution in Generation 6. Mega Steelix becomes even more massive and gains an even higher defense stat. It also gains the ability Sand Force, which boosts the power of rock, ground, and steel moves in a sandstorm. Mega Steelix became one of the most physically durable Pokemon in the game, capable of taking absurd amounts of damage from physical attackers. Mega Steelix's design is also very striking. It gains crystal-like formations and looks even more like a living fortress. It becomes heavier, sharper, and more imposing. Mega Steelix is one of those Mega Evolutions that feels like a true upgrade rather than a redesign. It takes Steelix and makes it more Steelix. Steelix has also been important in Pokemon lore because of its connection to Onix. Onix is often found in caves and mountains. Steelix represents what happens when Onix becomes older, tougher, and more compressed by the underground world. It's like a natural evolution through geological time. This makes Steelix one of the most believable evolutions in Pokemon. The concept feels grounded in a fantasy version of real science. In the Johto games, Steelix is associated with Jasmine, the Steel-type gym leader in Olivine City. Jasmine uses Steelix as her ace Pokemon, and it is one of the toughest gym battles in the game for many players. Jasmine's Steelix is bulky, hits hard, and can be difficult to defeat if you don't have fire, water, or fighting moves. This battle helped cement Steelix as a serious Pokemon. It wasn't just a cool evolution, it was a legitimate threat. Jasmine's Steelix also introduced many players to the Steel type for the first time. Steel was new in Generation 2, and players were still learning what it resisted and what it was weak to. Fighting Steelix taught players quickly that Steel is hard to break through with normal attacks. It made Steel feel powerful, and Steelix was the face of that lesson. Steelix has also appeared in many later games as a strong defensive Pokemon. It is often found in caves or mountainous areas, fitting its underground identity. It is usually not extremely common, and evolving one requires the metal coat and trading, which keeps it somewhat special. In competitive play, Steelix has often been used as a physical wall and hazard setter. Its high defense makes it great for switching into physical attackers. It can set Stealth Rock, spread status with moves like Toxic, and threaten with Earthquake. However, its low special defense and common weaknesses mean it can be pressured by special attackers and water types. Still, Steelix has remained relevant in many lower tiers and formats because of its reliability. Steelix's shiny form is also notable. It changes from gray to a more golden tone, making it look like it's made of a different metal. A shiny Steelix looks like a treasure snake, which fits its underground theme. In Pokemon Go, Steelix has been useful in certain PvP leagues because of its bulk and typing. Steel, ground gives it many resistances, and it can function as a tanky Pokemon that wears opponents down. Mega Steelix also exists in Go, giving it additional relevance. Steelix's overall identity is simple but powerful. It is a Pokemon that represents strength through endurance. It is not flashy, it is not fast, it is not magical. It is heavy, durable, and relentless. It is the kind of Pokemon that doesn't need to dodge attacks because it can survive them. And that's Steelix, the evolved form of Onix, transformed from stone into steel, built to live deep underground and endure anything the world throws at it. It is one of the most physically defensive Pokemon ever made, and it remains one of the most satisfying examples of an evolution that truly feels like a natural upgrade. Shuckle is a Pokemon that feels like it was created as an experiment, like the developers sat down and asked themselves what would happen if they made a Pokemon that was almost entirely defense. Not a Pokemon that hits hard, not a Pokemon that moves fast, not a Pokemon that looks heroic or intimidating. Just a small creature that refuses to break. Shuckle has been around since Generation 2, and despite its tiny size and strange design, it has become legendary in a very specific way. It is one of the most absurdly durable Pokemon in the entire franchise, and it has built a reputation for surviving things it has absolutely no business surviving. Shuckle is a bug and rock type Pokemon introduced in Generation 2. Its design looks like a small worm or slug living inside a rock shell. The shell has holes in it, and Shuckle's long neck and limbs can extend out of those holes. It has a simple face with small eyes and a neutral expression. Shuckle doesn't look like it wants to fight. It looks like it wants to hide, and that's basically what it does. The idea of Shuckle is that it lives inside its shell and uses it as protection. That shell is its entire identity. It's not a fast predator. It's not a flashy attacker. It's a creature that survives by being almost impossible to damage. In the wild, a Shuckle would probably spend most of its time staying still, blending into rocky environments, and avoiding attention. Shuckle's Pokédex entries often describe it as a Pokemon that stores berries inside its shell. Some entries say it collects berries and keeps them inside, and over time, the berries ferment into juice. This juice is sometimes described as being delicious or valuable. This is one of the strangest pieces of Pokemon lore because it turns Shuckle into a living berry jar. It's not just a defensive creature, it's also a tiny fermentation machine. This berry juice detail has become one of the most famous facts about Shuckle. In some games, NPCs even mention Shuckle's berry juice or refer to it as something special. It's a weird, oddly specific piece of world building that makes Shuckle feel more like an animal with real habits rather than just a battle monster. The idea of berries fermenting inside Shuckle's shell also implies that Shuckle might accidentally create something like alcohol. Pokemon never fully leans into that, but the implication is there. Shuckle stores berries, berries break down, and juice forms. It's a very unusual concept for a Pokemon, but it fits Shuckle's vibe perfectly. Shuckle is weird. Shuckle does weird things. In terms of typing, Bug and Rock is an unusual combination. Bug types are often associated with speed or status moves, while rock types are associated with defense and physical power. Shuckle combines these ideas into a Pokemon that is defensive but also has some interesting resistances and weaknesses. Shuckle's weaknesses include water, rock, and steel, and it also takes damage from common moves, because Bug Rock has several vulnerabilities. However, Shuckle's absurd defenses often compensate for these weaknesses. Even if an attack is super effective, Shuckle might still survive because its defense and special defense are so high. Shuckle is famous for having some of the highest defense and special defense stats in the entire series. In many generations, Shuckle has been near the top of the list for raw defensive stats. This makes it a Pokemon that can take both physical and special hits, which is rare. Many defensive Pokemon are bulky on one side but not the other. Shuckle is bulky on both sides. The trade-off is that Shuckle has extremely low HP and extremely low offensive stats. Its attack and special attack are terrible. Its speed is also terrible. Shuckle is slow, weak, and fragile in terms of HP, but it is protected by defenses so high that it often doesn't matter. This stat distribution makes Shuckle one of the most extreme examples of Pokemon design philosophy. Pokemon usually balances stats so that a creature has strengths and weaknesses, but Shuckle takes that to an extreme. Shuckle is almost all defense, almost no offense. It is the definition of a wall. Because Shuckle can't deal much damage, it often relies on indirect strategies. One of the most common ways Shuckle is used is with moves like Toxic, which poisons the opponent and slowly drains their health over time. Shuckle can also use moves like Protect, which blocks attacks for a turn, allowing poison damage to build up. This creates a slow, grinding battle style where Shuckle doesn't win by attacking, but by outlasting. Shuckle can also learn moves like Rest, which fully heals it but puts it to sleep. Because Shuckle is so defensive, it can sometimes afford to sleep for a few turns while still surviving. This makes Shuckle even more difficult to break. Another famous Shuckle move is Sticky Web, which sets a hazard that lowers the speed of opposing Pokemon when they switch in. Sticky Web is useful because it supports the entire team, slowing opponents down and making them easier to handle. Shuckle can set Sticky Web because it is durable enough to survive long enough to use it. This gives Shuckle a valuable support role, even if it can't attack. Shuckle can also learn Stealth Rock, another hazard move that damages opponents when they switch in. Stealth Rock is one of the most influential moves in competitive Pokemon, and Shuckle being able to set it makes it useful as a lead Pokemon. Shuckle can come in at the start of a battle, set hazards, and then sit there stubbornly refusing to faint. Shuckle's ability options are also interesting. One of Shuckle's common abilities is Sturdy, which prevents it from being knocked out in one hit when at full health. This makes Shuckle even more reliable for setting hazards, because it guarantees it can survive at least one strong hit. Shuckle's other ability is Gluttony in some generations, which allows it to eat berries earlier than usual. This fits perfectly with Shuckle's berry theme. Shuckle is literally the berry Pokemon in lore, so giving it an ability related to berry consumption is a great match. Shuckle's hidden ability is Contrary in some generations. Contrary reverses stat changes, meaning moves that normally lower stats will raise them instead, and moves that normally raise stats will lower them instead. This ability is extremely powerful when combined with certain moves, and Shuckle has one of the most famous combos in Pokemon history. Contrary plus Shell Smash. Shell Smash normally raises attack, special attack, and speed sharply, but lowers defense and special defense sharply. With Contrary, those stat changes reverse. That means Shuckle's attack, special attack, and speed go down, but its defense and special defense go up even more. Shuckle's defenses are already absurd, so boosting them even further creates a Pokemon that is nearly impossible to damage. This strategy is mostly a gimmick, but it is a perfect example of how Shuckle can become ridiculous. Shuckle is already extreme, and the right ability and move combination can push it into absurd territory. Shuckle is also famous for one particular meme: "Don't thumb with Shuckle." This phrase became popular because Shuckle looks harmless, but it can be incredibly annoying and difficult to defeat. The meme reflects the experience of fighting Shuckle in battle. You think it will be easy, and then you realize it won't go down. Shuckle's reputation also comes from the fact that it has been used in certain competitive formats as a stall Pokemon. Stall teams rely on wearing opponents down slowly rather than attacking aggressively, and Shuckle fits that style perfectly. It can set hazards, spread poison, and survive for a long time. In story playthroughs, Shuckle is not usually a main team member because it doesn't help you progress quickly. It doesn't knock out trainers fast. It doesn't sweep gyms. It just survives. That can be useful in some battles, but it can also make the game feel slow. Still, some players enjoy using Shuckle because it's funny and because it can be surprisingly effective against certain opponents who can't break through its defenses. In Pokemon Gold and Silver, Shuckle can be obtained in a unique way. There is an NPC who gives you a Shuckle to hold onto, asking you to take care of it. This is one of the most memorable ways to obtain a Pokemon because it feels like you're borrowing someone's pet. You can choose to return it or keep it. Many players kept it. This made Shuckle feel like a gift Pokemon, which often makes Pokemon feel more special. That gift, Shuckle, also contributed to Shuckle's popularity because it gave players a guaranteed way to get one without searching for it. It became a quirky little companion you didn't expect. In the anime, Shuckle has appeared occasionally, often portrayed as a shy Pokemon that hides in its shell. The anime also sometimes references Shuckle's berry juice, reinforcing that lore detail. Shuckle isn't a major star, but it fits into episodes where unusual Pokemon habits are highlighted. In Pokemon Go, Shuckle became famous for being one of the bulkiest Pokemon in the game in terms of defense. It has been used in gyms and in certain PvP formats because it is hard to knock out. However, because it deals low damage, it can also be slow and inefficient. Still, Shuckle's defensive reputation carried over into Go perfectly. Shuckle's shiny form is also quite noticeable. It changes from yellow to blue, giving it a very different look. Shiny Shuckle is popular because it stands out and because Shuckle itself is already a meme Pokemon. A blue Shuckle feels like an extra special version of something already weird. Shuckle's overall identity is one of stubborn endurance. It is a Pokemon that refuses to go down. It doesn't need to be powerful because it wins by outlasting. It is small, strange, and defensive to an absurd degree. It stores berries inside its shell, creates juice, and somehow becomes one of the most iconic defensive Pokemon ever made. And that's Shuckle, a tiny bug, rock Pokemon that looks harmless, survives almost anything, and quietly turns battles into slow endurance tests where the opponent eventually realizes they should have never underestimated the little rock jar creature in the first place. Heracross is one of those Pokemon that feels like it was built to be a fan favorite the moment it was created. It has a simple, strong concept, a memorable design, and a clear identity that doesn't need a complicated explanation. It's a beetle Pokemon with a giant horn, and it fights like one. Heracross was introduced in Generation 2, and ever since then, it has been one of the most recognizable bug-type Pokemon in the entire series. partly because it breaks the usual expectations of what a bug type is supposed to be. Most bug-type Pokemon in the early generations were small, fragile, and designed to be early-game creatures that evolve quickly and then fall off later. Heracross is not like that at all. Heracross is a fully evolved Pokemon that is strong, physically powerful, and useful throughout an entire playthrough. It doesn't feel like a temporary team member, it feels like a serious fighter. Heracross is a bug and fighting-type Pokemon. That typing alone makes it stand out, because bug fighting is not common, especially in earlier generations. Bug is often considered a weaker type in the early games, because it has fewer strong moves, and many Pokemon resist it. Fighting, on the other hand, is a strong offensive type that hits normal, rock, steel, ice, and dark super effectively. Combining bug and fighting creates a Pokemon that can hit a wide range of opponents hard, and it gives Heracross a unique role. Heracross's design is based on a rhinoceros beetle, a real insect known for its strength relative to its size. In Japan, rhinoceros beetles are popular, often kept as pets, and associated with childhood fascination. Heracross fits that cultural background. It is a beetle that looks strong and heroic, with a big horn that resembles a weapon. The horn is the defining feature of Heracross. It has a large, cross-shaped horn on its head, which is where its name likely comes from. Hera may reference Hercules, the mythological hero known for strength, and cross refers to the horn shape. Heracross's name fits its identity, a strong beetle with a cross-like horn. Heracross is usually depicted as blue with a lighter underside. Its eyes are sharp, and its body looks athletic. It doesn't look like a creepy bug, it looks like a fighter. That's one of the reasons Heracross became popular. Many people who don't like bug Pokemon still like Heracross because it feels less like a bug and more like a warrior. Heracross's Pokédex entries often emphasize its strength. Many descriptions say it can lift objects many times its own weight, or that it can throw heavy things with ease. This is based on real insect strength, but exaggerated to Pokemon levels. Some entries describe Heracross using its horn to flip opponents or to toss enemies into the air. It's basically described like a wrestling beetle. Another recurring detail is that Heracross is attracted to sweet sap. This is also based on real beetles, which are drawn to tree sap and sweet smells. In the Pokemon world, Heracross is often found near trees, especially in forests where sap might be present. This detail gives Heracross a natural, animal-like behavior that balances out its battle identity. It isn't always fighting. Sometimes it's just looking for something sweet to eat. In the Johto games, Heracross is one of the Pokemon that can be found by using Headbutt on trees. This is a very memorable mechanic because it makes Heracross feel like a secret reward. You don't just walk into grass and find it. You have to interact with the environment. You have to headbutt trees and see what falls out. And if you're lucky, you might find Heracross. This method of encounter made Heracross feel special. It wasn't common. It wasn't guaranteed. It was something you discovered through experimentation. Many players remember the excitement of headbutting trees repeatedly, hoping for a rare Pokemon, and then seeing Heracross appear. Heracross's stats reflect its identity perfectly. It has high attack, making it a strong physical attacker. Its defense and HP are decent, giving it some durability. Its speed is not amazing, but it's good enough to outspeed some opponents. Heracross is not a glass cannon. It's more like a sturdy fighter. It can take hits and keep going. Heracross's move pool includes many strong physical moves. It can learn fighting-type moves like Brick Break, Close Combat, and Megahorn, which is one of its most famous moves. Megahorn is a powerful bug-type move that uses the horn to strike the opponent. It has high base power and fits Heracross perfectly. Mega Horn is basically Heracross's signature attack, even though other Pokemon can learn it too. Mega Horn is especially important because Bug-type moves were often weak in early generations. Having a powerful Bug move gave Heracross an advantage. It could actually use its Bug typing offensively in a serious way. Mega Horn hits Psychic and Dark types super effectively, which is valuable because Psychic types were very strong in early Pokemon. Heracross being able to threaten Psychic types made it even more useful. Heracross can also learn moves like Reversal, which becomes stronger when the user has low HP. This fits Heracross's fighting spirit theme. It can also learn moves like Swords Dance, which boosts attack sharply. With Swords Dance, Heracross can become extremely dangerous because its attack is already high. Heracross's abilities also add to its power. One of its common abilities is Guts, which boosts attack when the Pokemon has a status condition like Burn or Poison. This is a powerful ability because it turns a disadvantage into an advantage. If Heracross gets burned, it would normally lose attack power, but with Guts, it becomes stronger instead. This makes Heracross difficult to shut down with status moves. Heracross's other ability is Swarm, which boosts Bug-type moves when Heracross is at low HP. Swarm is a classic Bug-type ability, and it makes Mega Horn even stronger when Heracross is in danger. This creates a dramatic comeback feeling, where Heracross hits harder when it's hurt. Heracross's hidden ability is Moxie in some generations. Moxie boosts attack when Heracross knocks out an opponent. This ability can turn Heracross into a sweeping machine because each knockout makes it stronger. Moxie fits Heracross's fighter personality perfectly. It gains confidence and momentum as it wins. Heracross also received a Mega Evolution in Generation 6. Mega Heracross becomes even more muscular and gains an even larger horn. Its design becomes more extreme, with a bulkier body and a more intimidating presence. Mega Heracross also gains the ability Skill Link, which makes multi-hit moves always hit the maximum number of times. Skill Link Mega Heracross became famous because it could use moves like Pin Missile and Rock Blast consistently, hitting 5 times every time. Combined with its high attack, this made Mega Heracross extremely powerful. It became one of the strongest physical attackers in the game during the Mega Evolution era. Mega Heracross also had a notable trade-off. It became slower. It gained power and bulk, but lost some speed. This made it more like a heavy hitter that needed support to get into battle safely. Still, the sheer damage output made it terrifying if it got the chance to attack. Heracross's role in competitive play has often been strong, especially in formats where it can take advantage of its abilities. Guts Heracross has been used with items like Flame Orb, which burns Heracross and activates Guts, boosting its attack while allowing it to hit extremely hard. This is a risky strategy because burn also causes damage over time, but the power boost can be worth it. Heracross has also been used as a counter to certain defensive Pokemon because of its strong fighting moves. Close combat can break through many bulky opponents. Megahorn can destroy Psychic types. It has coverage options that make it difficult to wall completely. Heracross's weaknesses are also important. Bug, fighting gives it a major weakness to flying, and flying moves can hit Heracross very hard. It is also weak to Fire, Psychic, and Fairy in later generations. These weaknesses mean Heracross has to be careful, especially against fast-flying types that can knock it out quickly. But if Heracross gets a chance to attack, it can often trade back or win outright. In the anime, Heracross is one of Ash's Pokemon in the Johto series, and it is portrayed as strong and enthusiastic. It also has a running gag where it is obsessed with sap, often trying to drink sap from Bulbasaur's bulb. This is both funny and consistent with its Pokédex lore. The anime did a good job of showing Heracross as both a powerful fighter and a quirky insect with simple desires. Heracross has also appeared in many spin-off games, often as a strong bug-type option. In Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, Heracross often fits the role of a tough fighter. In other games, it appears as a rare forest Pokemon, reinforcing its identity as something you find in trees. In Pokemon Go, Heracross is notable because it has historically been a regional Pokemon, meaning it was only available in certain parts of the world. This made Heracross valuable for collectors because you couldn't get it everywhere. Regional Pokemon create a sense of rarity and travel-based excitement, and Heracross benefited from that. Heracross's shiny form is also popular. It changes from blue to a pinkish tone, making it stand out strongly. A shiny Heracross looks very different, and because Heracross is already a fan favorite, the shiny is especially sought after. Heracross's overall legacy is that it helped prove bug types could be cool. Before Heracross, bug types were often seen as early game filler Pokemon. Heracross came along and showed that a bug type could be strong, competitive, and memorable. It wasn't just a bug, it was a fighter beetle with a signature horn attack and a serious presence. And that's Heracross. A beetle built like a wrestler, drawn to sweet sap, found by headbutting trees, and capable of hitting harder than most people expect from a bug-type Pokemon. It's simple, strong, and one of the most enduring examples of a Pokemon that feels both natural and heroic at the same time.